This is video A28, and I need to review a little bit before we go on. We've studied special right triangles, 1, 45, 45, 90. If I asked you to, and I told you that the hypotenuse was 1, you could easily find that the two legs would each be the square root of 2 over 2. And then our other special right triangle, a 30, 60, 90, once again, if I told you the hypotenuse was 1, you could easily tell me that the legs were 1/2 and the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, and then we studied a unit circle just very briefly. And so let's say that this is a unit circle in a coordinate plane. This is x, this is y. One thing we learned is that any ordered pair on here, any point on that circle, sure, it would have coordinates x, y, but we discovered that the x coordinate is the cosine of the angle, this central angle we would get going out to it. And the y coordinate was the sine of that angle. And that's going to be important for today's lesson. Okay, so what I want to do is slowly build what we're going to need to know about a unit circle, and these happen to fit very nicely onto it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to locate important points on the unit circle, like that one right there, and I would get that one with a 45-degree angle. Okay, and so I'm going to put 45. And another thing we've studied is how to convert that to radians. It's very simple. You guys know that 180 degrees all the way to here is pi radians, and this is a quarter of the way there, so it's pi over 4 radians. And so I can now count around the unit circle by going 45 degrees each time, or pi over 4 radians each time, and just marking off important angles. So here's another one that's a 45-degree jump from here, and it's also another pi over 4, so 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2 radians. Okay, another 45 degrees takes me, maybe I should use this, takes me out to here, so that's another 45, and another pi over 4, so this is 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, and 3 pi over 4 radians. Okay, another 45 brings me to 180, and that's 4 pi over 4, or pi radians, something that you already knew, because 180 degrees is pi radians. Continuing, and I'll bring it out to here, make another important angle. So think about it, this is 4 pi over 4, this must be 5 pi over 4, and so 225 degrees, or 5 pi over 4 radians. Continuing, I'm going to start to pick up the pace here. Another 45 is 270. 6 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 2. And then the last 45, about right here. Okay, so that's another 45 degrees, or 315 degrees. And another pi over 4, this was 6, so this must be 7 pi over 4 radians. Okay, this angle right here, okay, we could say it's 0 degrees, but also 0 radians, but it's also 360 degrees, and another pi over 4, so 8 pi over 4, or 2 pi radians, something that we already knew. Okay, and so know how to find these angles on the unit circle, and it's just a matter, especially with radians, of counting pi over 4. So if I said find 5 pi over 4, you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and there it is. Okay, so know where it's located on a coordinate plane. Okay, and we can do the same thing with our 30-degree angles. Okay, and so if I mark this here, and I'll try to make these look different, because they are different. This is a 30-degree angle, okay, and that's 1/6 of the way to 180, so this must be pi over 6 radians. Okay, and so I'm going to continue to mark off 30-degree angles on here, but I'm going to do it a little more quickly. So that'd be 60, and then another pi over 6 is 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3. Okay, and so let's mark that off and make them big like that. Okay, the next one would be up here again. This would be 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. the next one right here, okay, that must be, if this is 3 pi over 6, this is 4 pi over 6, or actually, let me erase that because I'm going to do the degrees first. This is 120 degrees, 4 pi over 6 reduces. Okay, the next one, just go straight across from there, must be 150, and then this was 4 pi over 6, so this must be 5 pi over 6. Note that we're getting close to 6 pi over 6, which is right here. Okay, and then my next one, about right there, you can see that it's dropped down from here. So okay, so I'm adding another 30, so 210 degrees, 6 pi over 6, so this is 7 pi over 6. Another one dropped down from there. Okay, so 240, and this must be 8 pi over 6, which is 4 pi over 3. The next one's right here, that would reduce. This was 8 pi over 3, this must be, or 8 pi over 6, this must be 9 pi over 6. And then making this 10 pi over 6. So add another 30, get 300 degrees, 10 pi over 6, 5 pi over 3. And then the last one right over here. Okay, so add another 30. And we know this is 12 pi over 6, this must be 11 pi over 6. All right, so note that within each quadrant, remember this is the XY coordinate plane. Within each quadrant, I have 3 important points, but I also have these points here. Okay? And these are going to be the important points that you're expected just to know in the unit circle. And what you're supposed to know about them is how to find the cosine and the sine of these angles. And it's really simple because you've done this work already with these special right triangles. Okay, so I'm going to just draw in 2 of these just really lightly. Okay, so we talked about this being a unit circle. And a unit circle has a radius of 1 right there. That makes this side right here the square root of 3 over 2, which happens to be the x-coordinate of this point, because look at that length right there. So the square root of 3 over 2. And then the height here, which is the y-coordinate of that point, is 1/2. Okay, and so if I ask you now, what's the cosine of this 30-degree angle? Remember how the cosine is the x-coordinate. So it's the cosine of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. And the sine of 30 is 1/2. And so the cosine is how far right or left we are on the unit circle. Okay, in this case, we're the square root of 3 over 2 to the right, and so this is positive. If I go left, and we'll see this in a little bit, the cosine would be negative because in the coordinate plane, all the x's are negative over here. As a matter of fact, the cosines are negative this way, and over here the cosines are positive simply because this is a coordinate plane. Likewise, in a coordinate plane, you guys know that the y-coordinates up here are positive, and the y-coordinate is the sine of each angle. And so up here, all the sines are positive. Just remember, it's just because you're in a coordinate plane, and down low, that's a positive. The sines are all negative. Okay, so let's find another. If I say, what's the sine of 45 degrees? Okay, what this comes from is this special right triangle. Okay, once again, a unit circle, so the hypotenuse, this radius is 1. Okay, here's my x-coordinate and here's my y-coordinate, and they're the same. They're both positive because I'm moving right and up. Okay, so the sine of pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. Let's do another one. Okay, now this one I'm going to hold the triangle backwards, but we still have the same lengths. Okay, and this is our 30, 60, 90. The radius is 1, so this hypotenuse is 1. This must be 1/2, and then the square root of 3 over 2 up. Okay, these just backwards. So 1/2 to the right, square root of 3 over 2 up. So now if I say what's the cosine of 60, you could just say 1/2. What if I say what's the cosine of 90? Okay, so that would be the x coordinate of that point right there. Remember, this is just a coordinate plane. Okay, this radius is 1, so the ordered pair right here must be, I'll do it up here, 0, 1. So the cosine of 90 is 0. The sine of 90 is 1. Okay, now all of these coordinates are the same all the way around here. Okay, look at this one. Okay, here I have my 30, 60, 90. I go left 1/2, up square root of 3 over 2. So left 1/2 is negative 1/2, up is positive. So now I know the cosine of 120 degrees is negative 1/2. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is try to quickly fill this out now. Okay, remember, here, I'll do one more. Let's do this ordered pair right here. Okay, and so here I have my 45, 45, 90. I go right square root of 2 over 2, but down square root of 2 over 2. And so the ordered pair here, right is positive, down is negative. Okay, so we can now very quickly answer questions like, what's the cosine of 4 pi over 3? So the first thing you need to do is figure out where that is. 4 pi over 3 down here, realize that's one of these. That's one of the pi over 6 angles. And so you're just counting around the unit circle until you get enough pi over 6s. Okay, so I have 1 pi over 6, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course, this is 6 pi over 6. This is a good place to start. 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6. And that reduces, so I know I'm way down low, but just a little bit this way. And if I'm way down low a little bit this way, that must be this. It must be way down low is, down is negative. The bigger number is the square root of 3 over 2. Just a little bit to the left, left is negative and a little bit is 1/2. And you can see those values on the triangle again. Okay, so way down low and just a little bit to the left. Now, you will be, next year when you start pre-calc, they'll probably give you a mastery test on this. And you're not going to have much time to finish it, and you're going to have to answer questions like that. What's the, and it'll get more advanced, what's the tangent of 11 pi over 6? And you'll be expected just to kind of know it, but there are a bunch of tricks to this, and here's one. Okay, so cosine has to do with x. X moves either right or left. So if I were to say, what's the cosine of 30 degrees? Okay, you'd first have to know where that point is on the unit circle. So be good at finding those points. Okay, so we're way over here. We're not very high up, but we're way over at 30 degrees. Cosine is x, so I'm going to move right or left from here until I hit that point, and I'm going to count how many important points I pass on the way there. So watch. I'm moving from the y-axis now. I'm moving right 1, notice the 1 there, 2, notice the 2 there, 3, and notice the 3 there. Since I moved right, it's positive. Since it's 3, it's the square root of 3 over 2. If I said, what's the sine of 45? Sine is y, so it's moving up or down. So lay your pencil horizontally now. Okay, you have to locate the 45 degree angle. Okay, and then just move up to it and count the important points until you hit it. And so watch. 1, notice the 1 there, and 2, notice the 2 there. So the sine of 45 is the square root of 2 over 2. Let's do one more, one that we don't have labeled on here. Okay, let's find the cosine of 5 pi over 6. Okay, so you would quickly find it. We're way over to the left. We're way over here. Okay, cosine is x, so I'm going to count left until I hit it, and I count the important points, and I go 1, 2, 3. I'm left 3, so the cosine must be negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay, note that the sign would be positive because we moved up. Okay, this is our second to last lesson this year. So do your best, try to fill in your unit circle. Good luck.